In October 1807, an 18-year-old convict named Richard Diemen escaped from a prison farm in northern Tasmania, and then set out to take revenge on his captors. With fellow escapee John Brown, he shot dead Corporal John Curry. They captured and tied up a soldier and a convict who had overheard the murder before capturing another soldier and murdering both soldiers. This was the start of Richard Diemen's rampage.
These are the blunders from down thunder that made Australia great.
Welcome to this episode of Blunders Down Under, laughable lessons from the past, in which we talk about dumb decisions from the past that have helped make Australia great. I'm Josh McGrath.
And I'm John Gibbs. And today we are talking about Richard Diemen, the teenage convict who became a bushranger and Australia's first recorded serial killer.
So who was Richard Diemen?
Richard Diemen was born in England in 1789. At the age of 14, he was arrested, tried, and sentenced to transportation for life. He spent 6 months imprisoned in the prison hulk Retribution before being transported to New South Wales, arriving in May 1804. He was assigned to work on a farm, and the following year he was convicted of various petty thefts.
Well, where was he sent next?
In July 1807, Diemen was sent to Port Dalrymple in the northern part of Van Diemen's Land and was put to work on a prison farm at Patterson's Plains. While working on the farm, he secretly came into contact with John Brown, a fellow convict who had escaped the previous year and was still on the run. Diemen decided that he too would escape and then take revenge on his captors.
What happened to Diemen's first victim?
After escaping from the farm, Diemen lay in wait for his first victim, armed with a stolen musket supplied by Brown. Diemen and Brown shot dead Corporal John Curry. They were overheard by two men in a nearby hut, so they bailed them up at gunpoint. One was a soldier, the other a convict named John Morey. Diemen and Brown ordered Morey to tie up the soldier. Then they tied up Morey and hid in the hut, waiting for another soldier to arrive.
What happened to the second soldier?
When the second soldier arrived, Brown and Diemen tied him up. They seized what they wanted from the hut, then set the hut on fire and marched Morey and the two soldiers off through the bush a distance of about 30 kilometres. There they stopped and shot the two soldiers, Private James Daniels and Private Robert Grindleston. Diemen and Brown, with their prisoner Morey, then started walking again, but began to doubt that the soldiers they had shot were actually dead. They turned back to where the bodies lay, and finding one of the soldiers still alive, cut his throat.
After killing the soldiers in cold blood, where did Diemen and Brown go to escape from the law?
After completing their third murder, Diemen and Brown marched their prisoner in an easterly direction towards the Van Diemen's Land east coast, hoping they could escape the island by joining or commandeering a passing boat.
What happened next?
1 month after the killings, Diemen and Brown were joined by 8 more convicts who had escaped from Hobart. However, when the newcomers learned from Morey the dangerous truth about Diemen and Brown, they overpowered the two murderers, tied them up, and took their guns and ammunition. They then commandeered a boat and sailed away, taking Morey with them, but leaving Diemen and Brown behind.
What did Diemen and Brown decide to do next?
The loss of their guns and ammunition meant that Diemen and Brown would have difficulty hunting for food and defending themselves against attacks. So they decided to walk south towards the fringes of the Hobart settlement, where they could seek help from fellow escapees. After a long walk, they joined up with some sympathetic kangaroo hunters.
And where did they set up their new base?
After stealing some guns and supplies, Diemen and Brown went north into the uninhabited central part of Van Diemen's Land, where there were plenty of hiding places but no Europeans. They set up a base there from which they plundered the outlying settlements of Hobart, and they committed many acts of barbarity against local Aboriginals.
Did anyone join them?
Lemon and Brown were joined by another escaped convict, Richard Scanlon, an Irishman serving a life sentence. Brown and Scanlon spoke with each other in Gaelic, a language which Lemon couldn't understand. One morning when Brown was out and Scanlon was preparing breakfast, Lemon put a gun to the back of his head, blew his brains out and hung him on a tree by his heels. When Brown returned, Lemon showed him the body and remarked that they would understand one another better for the future.
What attempts were made to capture Lemon and Brown?
A reward of £50 was offered for the capture of Lemon and Brown. Several parties set out to search for them, but failed to find them. In early February 1808, the bushrangers raided the farm of a settler named William Parrish. A military detachment from Port Dalrymple was sent to catch them, but returned empty-handed after searching for 8 days. Then, at the end of February, Lemon and Brown robbed and kidnapped a settler named Michael Mansfield, who promised to bring them supplies if they freed him.
What did Mansfield actually do?
When Michael Mansfield returned, he brought 2 men with him to capture the bushrangers for the £50 reward. A fight broke out, during which Mansfield shot and killed Lemon, and after that Brown was captured and bound. Mansfield and his friends cut off Lemon's head to prove his death and made Brown carry it as they frog-marched him to Hobart to claim their reward. Lemon's head was displayed on a stake in Hobart. He was about 20 years old at the time of his death.
What happened to John Brown?
Brown was reported to have confessed that he and Lemon had killed 1 Aboriginal woman and 2 men, that Lemon had tortured and killed 2 Aboriginal women, and that they had shot and wounded 4 other Aboriginal women. Brown was sent to Sydney to be tried. He was found guilty and sentenced to be hanged and dissected. He was executed on 31 May 1808.
What happened to Mansfield?
Michael Mansfield's efforts to bring Lemon and Brown to justice didn't win him any friends with the local criminals and escaped convicts. As a result of his actions in bringing the bushrangers to justice, a large number of his sheep were stolen and other parts of his property were plundered, so that he was forced to give up his farm after substantial losses and move to another district.
Well, what's the moral of this story?
If you show contempt for the lives and well-being of others, one day others might show contempt for your life and well-being. Or, as the proverb puts it, he who lives by the sword shall die by the sword.